Welcome back to Counselors in the Car Getting Coffee. My name is Gordon Gooding. I'm a local therapist here on Long Island.
I'm Margaret Lorenz. I'm also a therapist on Long Island, and we do offer teletherapy as well.
Throughout New York State. And today, as you know, we're two people who have worked together for many, many years. And lately we've been having some very special guests join us. And today I am excited and honored to have Monica Wells.
Oh my goodness. I feel so honored to be here, you guys.
We're excited to go for a ride.
Yes, I'm excited
and get
too.
some
Let's
coffee.
do it.
So
I
we're
love
going to
coffee.
get some coffee, and we got some things we want to talk about a little bit today.
Okay.
Can you fill us in a little bit, Monica, on what about you and your practice and where you're at it?
So I have a practice in Cold Spring Harbor. I have been practicing, oh my gosh, now since 2011 about, but private practice since 2018. I work with individuals, actually with kids mostly, teens and young adults who are neurodivergent. So think ADHD, autism, dyslexia, any type of learning difference, and also anxieties, because that's a big
one, right?
That's a big topic.
I think we're gonna talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure.
And full disclosure, you are my neighbor too in Cold Spring Harbor.
I am your neighbor.
We're Cold Spring
in
Harbor
Cold Spring
buddies.
Harbor. I just moved into Cold Spring Harbor. I was in Huntington for a very, very long time, and yeah, I just moved my office, and I love it here.
It's a fantastic town.
It's
I know
awesome.
you live here. It's a fantastic town.
Yes.
Great people.
Yes.
And I love having a practice here because to utilize the outside is great.
Yeah, for sure.
And we do have my favorite coffee shop here.
Do you both utilize outside in your
I
therapy
utilize
practice?
outside my practice a lot.
I do. I do some exposure therapies outside.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In what way?
I usually go into different shops because I work with a lot of socially anxious people. So a lot of working on social skills and anxieties. And we usually go into the shops, and if the kids, teens, young adults are afraid to do certain things, we work on their anxiety first, and then we go and we do some exposure therapy.
That's awesome. Do you see that growing maybe since the pandemic?
Yes.
I've seen a lot of people who
They're so isolated,
who will order food, but they only want to do it through the computer, who don't want to interact with the
And
person
they
delivering
come to the
the
door.
food.
They don't want to be seen
Yeah.
through
Yes.
the window, right?
Yes, they don't
Yeah.
want to be seen. They want there to be no interaction. Do you see a lot of
Yeah,
that?
I'm seeing a lot of that in in teens and some young adults. I'm seeing that a lot of. But as soon as they start working on that exposure and just kind of understanding their anxiety, I see their anxiety kind of like coming down. So, a lot of the times we'll say, I'll just kind of, sometimes I'll surprise my clients, and I'll be shocked because they're like, okay, I'm ready. And I've had them do things from,
It's so cool to watch them play.
Yeah.
I get to do that. Just,
Love
it's
it.
like,
No,
it
it's
makes it
amazing.
all worth it, because it's not just what happens in a therapy room, it's what happens when you leave the therapy room. Right? So,
exactly.
It's easy to,
Yeah, and sometimes it takes a long time, and sometimes it takes a short time. But I always see progress, especially when they are exposing themselves, because then they just start taking other risks, like talking to other people.
100%.
you're walking through the fear.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
utilizing that muscle. I always say.
You're feeling that uncomfortable, which is a big thing that I talk about in all of my
Good to be
sessions.
uncomfortable.
Yeah,
To be
That too.
uncomfortable,
You
you
do
have
say
to
that.
be
I
uncomfortable.
know with that.
Oh,
Yeah, it's good.
we have to be uncomfortable sometimes. And
Absolutely.
Sometimes our kids don't want to feel uncomfortable, but we have to.
We have to. We all do.
Yep.
But
Absolutely.
I think that it's not just about ordering the food and being there and collecting it from the person. It helps the client learn how to advocate for themselves. So I think
Yes.
that's what makes it
Yes.
really
Which is a
important.
skill we need throughout the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
You can't speak up for yourself. 100%. Well, since the theme is about getting coffee,
Yes.
and we are in a car,
Yes.
why don't we run inside, grab a cup of coffee, and then we can come back and talk a little bit more about anxiety, a little bit more about ADHD. And
Sounds good.
All right.
I'm excited.
awesome.
Awesome.
Little
Very
caffeine.
excited. Very excited for the coffee. Okay, so we started a side conversation without you.
But we got the coffee.
Yeah, we got
So
the coffee.
That's good.
So,
All right. Yeah, we did start something without being recorded, which just kind of defeats the purpose of Counselors in the Car Getting Coffee, but that's what happens sometimes. So
because we're human beings. So, We're talking about how prevalent social media is in almost kids kind of diagnosing
Everyone?
themselves.
Yes.
Or maybe everybody.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I saw it on
adults,
TikTok,
adults.
so I must be anxious. I must have ADHD. I must
Yes.
something, right?
Yes.
Yes, I have BPD. I have autism. I have ADHD.
For sure.
Do you see
I
that
see
a
that.
lot?
I see that a ton.
What are some of the fallacies you're seeing out there? Like, I mean,
Just kind of like, if somebody has like a certain just symptom, they're like, oh my gosh, I have ADHD, and I'm
One-
just kind
based on one
based on
thing,
one,
yeah.
and they're not really going and asking, seeing a therapist or going to a psychiatrist and getting diagnosed. They're like diagnosing themselves.
Yes.
Just a little scary. But yeah.
well, I see people throwing it around all the time now. Like, that's me and my ADHD. That's me now.
Yes.
People are saying it all the time. It's like, it's almost like common language. Like, it's like my OCD. People talk about my OCD because they
Oh,
like
yeah.
things organized. That doesn't mean you're OCD.
Yes. You
Yeah.
don't have a clinical diagnosis.
Just sometimes I'm a little unfocused. Doesn't mean it's ADHD.
Right, right. And I think it's almost like when you go through school, they're learning a lot, or they're getting videos about ADHD, all these different neurotypical diagnoses. Atypical.
No. Neurodivergent.
Neurodivergent.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Yes.
Neurodivergent.
Starting at
Neurodivergent.
all these-
Yeah.
All these neurodivergent diagnoses, and then because they hear it, they see different aspects of themselves that could fit into that.
Right.
But they,
Well, they're not taking into account everything.
Because there's so many more pieces to it.
Right. There's so many pieces to it. So yeah, sometimes it can get a little tricky when somebody.
Do you have
comes in.
kids and young adults coming in saying, I think I'm this because of that?
I mean, I see a lot of kids who come in and they have a certain diagnosis, and then they're trying to. Either they don't want that diagnosis, they're like, oh, well, then I think I have this diagnosis. And I'm just kind of like,
I Googled it, and I have all the symptoms of this, right?
Yes, but they don't know that a lot of symptoms, like, certain symptoms have, like the autism, and sometimes like even borderline personality disorders because of the emotion regulation stuff, that they don't understand that there's so much more to it than that, and that psychologists are really looking at it not just from like, okay, this is the stuff that's on Google, right?
Right.
That they're really taking the time to have questionnaires and ask parents and ask teachers and all of this stuff. But
So is there, I mean, I don't know if I feel like I get stuck on this all the time.
Okay.
Between with someone, they have ADHD, they have anxiety. Where does one begin? Where does the other take over? Because when you're ADHD, you have difficulty focusing, and then you're anxious, you have difficulty focusing.
Yeah.
There's those overlaps there.
yeah, so I mean, I'm actually a specialist in anxiety disorder.
And that's why I asked you. Not to put you on the spot or be obnoxious.
I know.
So you have to get it right, whatever it is. It's
One
going
of
to be.
the things that happens with a lot of individuals with anxiety disorders is because of some of the inattentiveness, and sometimes they're so just kind of nervous. They are either forgetful, there's a lot of that going on, so all of a sudden they're just kind of like, oh, I have ADHD. Or sometimes if they're seeing a therapist who doesn't really see individuals with ADHD, the therapist might think like, it's ADHD.
Yes.
It has to be ADHD. They're disorganized. They're this. They're that. And this is what we're seeing. And a lot of the times, once you treat the anxiety, like some of the ADHD symptoms go away. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, so a lot of the times you'll see it when the child is a lot younger. Sometimes you'll see the inattentiveness when the child is not anxious, but then, as somebody gets older, they might not have any of those, like inattentiveness, like they might not have that inattentiveness, they might not have the hyperactivity, they might not have any of these things, and then they're just kind of like, oh, I have ADHD. it has to be ADHD.
Or sometimes I've seen where different traumatic events can happen to someone,
Right.
or there's divorce. There's all these different things that can really impact them, and they have difficulty coping and become more impulsive, or have a difficult time, focusing. And we're like, that must be ADHD, when there's so many other factors involved. I see that in the schools a lot. Is that we kind of jump to these, we love jumping to ADHD.
Well,
right?
I think that people like to jump to ADHD because it's like, and then you can take this medication, and
then
everything
People
will
want
better.
a quick fix, right?
Everything will be cured.
Yeah.
Because even if you take medication, it doesn't necessarily mean that
No,
ADHD is going to
sometimes-
disappear.
Well, that's the other thing. Sometimes when we start taking ADHD medications, if somebody is anxious, it's going to make their anxiety worse.
Yeah.
Well, and the reaction to the medication. I've seen that a lot with people with medications. They're anxious and he takes medication, they're twice as anxious, and that's the wrong fit for them.
For sure. I think if you ever question if you have like ADHD for real, that you're struggling. And I see this, a lot in I think more so in like teen and young women, like girls and young women, is that they usually get underdiagnosed because a lot of the times they are inattentive. So a lot of the times we'll see them as like, oh, it's a girl, just kind of like daydreaming and not really paying attention in class. But a lot of these girls tend to be really, really, really bright, and they almost take their strengths and they do so much with their strengths that it almost kind of like masks the ADHD a lot of the times, and then
because they're compensating.
Yeah, they're
because they're so strong in that area that they don't, they don't fall behind as quickly. So
yes, but then you'll see a lot of girls who are just kind of like, oh my gosh, working till 2:00 in the morning. I was
So with a girl like that, when does the ADHD like come to the surface? When do you see them like start to really struggle? Or are they just always up till 2 in the morning?
They usually start struggling pretty early on, and a lot of the times, I would say probably like 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, they start to struggle, and a lot of the times, and this is so sad, but a lot of girls with ADHD think they're dumb, and they're
oh my god,
far
all the time,
far from dumb.
far from that,
far from that. I've had so many kids who've come to me later on in their teen years, and
once they get it under control and they see how they can excel and they have potential, and it's like, oh my god, I thought something was wrong with me for all these years.
I feel like once I kind of like teach them like, okay, well this is your brain, and this is how ADHD works, and these are some of the difficulties that you're gonna have, but these are also some of the strengths that you have. I always tend to I always say this to everybody, I always tend to just really pick up on people's strengths. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is your superpower. This is your strength, right?
100%, yes.
And, a lot of the times, people with ADHD, they're like, oh, I don't have any super strengths.
Yeah, so what is a super strength of ADHD?
A super strength of ADHD, a lot of individuals with ADHD are super duper creative. They can focus on a certain topic that they know that they are just super interested in, and they know really well, and they will go into this kind of like rabbit hole of just information.
Hyper-focused on
they will hyper-focus on these topics, and they know so much about these things. There are so many super strengths that thinking outside the box.
I see it.
So many kids and teens and young adults who can just kind of like...
I think parents get frustrated with it too. I mean, I've seen it with my kids where it's like their parents get so frustrated, but he can do this for hours.
Right.
He can play the video game. Or
and they don't understand
he can't be ADHD because he can do this forever.
Make a model,
don't understand that if it's something that's really interesting to that person with ADHD, that they can sit there for hours and do all of these things for hours, and when it's something that they are not interested in, it's so boring.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
I've had college
Yes.
students who just kind of like sit there and they're like, I cannot for the life of me pay attention. I can't pay attention. I don't know what this professor's talking about. I don't know what this teacher's talking about. And I have such a hard time paying attention. So I usually say, you know, well, sometimes medication is really good to kind of like help you focus in these certain classes. You don't have to take it all the time. And, you know, just kind of like focusing on a certain topic that you really love in college is going to be really important for the ADHD person. And sometimes it's kind of like, okay, do you need college? Can you do something? A lot of people with ADHD do great things with their hands, or you know, technology stuff is really another one that
But
they
even
can
if,
just kind of
I was
like.
thinking too,
Yes.
is sometimes just the idea of having that subject they're into. You know, sometimes we have to take those classes that everybody hates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do.
Policy. I'm not going to mention any
Yes.
names, but policy, statistics, like.
Oh, statistics.
But I hated going through that. But it was like,
I know it
how
is
do we
one of,
get
and
them through it? Doesn't have to
Exactly.
excel through it, but we just gotta.
It
kinda
is
get
one of
through
those. Yeah, it is one of those things that we just have to get them through that.
Yeah.
And one of the things I usually suggest is getting a tutor, because sometimes it could just be the professor is super dry, super just kind of like wow, 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 wow.
Maybe have
Peanuts
a
teacher. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just kind of like, and I usually say this. I've had girls who come to me and they're like, I just don't understand what the teacher is saying, and I'm like, okay, well, why don't you try, you know, going to a different teacher or going to a tutor, and usually
Hearing it a different way.
hearing
Yeah.
it a different way, because sometimes the way that your brain thinks is not necessarily the way that another person's brain thinks. A lot of, you know, one of the things that I usually see a lot, and I've been seeing this a lot, especially in girls, is ADHD and dyslexia. So I will see that a lot, right? Where they're just kind of like, I don't understand like what this teacher's talking about, and it's so boring, and then they are overwhelmed because they have to learn all this information, and then they just, I'm like, okay, let's try tutor, you know, let's see where it goes, and then they're like, oh, I totally understand that, you know.
Hearing it a different way.
Hearing
Instead
it
of
a
going
different
left
way.
all the time, we start going
Yes.
right. You know, do a YouTube video.
Exactly.
Hear from a different tutor. Like
Exactly.
some different type of
Something
input,
different.
You know?
Your brain learns differently, so it needs to process things differently. A lot of ADHD students tend to really do well with experiential, so experiencing that thing that they're trying to learn.
How does the dyslexia? I thought you said ADHD and dyslexia. Right. How does that play into
They're
it?
connected.
Like,
There can be.
Yeah, I mean, I've for some reason I've just been kind of like seeing a lot of girls that have dyslexia. So, you know, it's just kind of, again, it's just kind of like that difference in the brain and kind of like how their brain processes information. It's really hard for them. So, just learning it a different way is going to make that processing of information, it's going to be easier for them if they get it from somebody who's, let's say, a special education teacher,
Right.
or somebody who
different
just
skill set,
teaches,
Yeah.
who teaches something the way that they learn. I mean, I always say this, like, I know Temple Grandin always used to say this, like, if we can't, if they can't learn the way that we teach, then we should teach the way that they learn. So, like, even in my practice, I do a lot of that. Like, if you don't understand it this way, okay, well, let me explain it to you in a different way.
yeah.
Sometimes I use not sometimes, I always use a lot of visuals in my therapy, because I know that, you know, the kid with ADHD, the kid with dyslexia, the kid with autism is going to benefit from those visuals.
No, I really like all of that, because it takes away that idea that they're lazy.
Oh my gosh,
That drives me crazy.
I can't tell you how
That
many
just
times
drives me crazy. I hear that
I know.
so
I've heard that
much.
from parents. I've heard that from psychiatrists, and I'm like, this
They just
child is
don't wanna
not
do
lazy.
it. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
just don't want to do it, and I'm sitting there, and I spoke to someone one time and they were like, oh, my child's lazy. And I was like, your child is not lazy. Like, I promise you, your child is not lazy. It is just the way that their brain processes information. It's just the way that their brain, and a lot of the things, right, is that a lot of kids with ADHD do get very overwhelmed with the things that they have to do.
Right. Becomes a
So
blob.
it becomes a blob, and they almost kind of like stop themselves from.
And then and it's like a spiral though, because then
spiral.
they get down on themselves.
Yeah.
And you're down on
Right.
yourself. Why bother trying? And just kind of.
And it becomes an insurmountable amount of work to do.
Yeah.
And I've told my clients I don't believe in laziness.
Yeah,
I really don't believe in laziness.
I don't believe in laziness, and I don't believe in bad kids.
No.
There's
100%.
no bad
Yeah.
kids.
100%.
There's no bad
100%.
kids.
But that laziness is a thing, because I have clients say, "I'm just lazy. I'm just,"
And it follows
Yeah.
throughout their life.
Yeah.
You know?
But when you do see it click on, especially some of these kids who are not diagnosed or young, and then they see that they had this, and then they get the help they need, it's like watching that light bulb go on. It's like,
Oh,
we're
I've
talking about
seen so
before,
many
when you see a
clients.
Yeah.
kid or we see a client or somebody get it,
Yeah.
and how exciting that is to see
Yeah.
them walk through that fear that time. and
Yeah,
how-
real
yeah.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
What before we wrap up, in terms of where would someone start if they think they had it? Like in terms of ADHD, if you're a young adult out there and struggling in college or just out in the workforce and still struggling with some of these issues, what would your advice be about where to begin with that? Because I think sometimes people think, well, if I didn't have it in school, I don't have it now, which is not true.
Right.
At all.
It's not true. Again, it's mostly because, high school tends to be a lot more structured. So a lot of kids with ADHD will actually do, especially girls, will actually do pretty well in high school.
Yep.
Once they get to college, it's kind of like a free-for-all, and
Gotta
they
make up
don't.
their own schedule.
Well,
they
the
got to
thi-
figure out when they're studying,
right,
all that stuff.
right. Well, the thing with like ADHD too is like there's a lack in executive functioning, so it's really hard for kids to be able to organize themselves. In school, there is that structure and there's that like organization piece. When you get to college, there is not. So you see a lot of kids go to college and fail,
Fail
and
out.
then come back home, and then they're like,
that's
"There's
why it's
something
such a-
wrong with me. I'm dumb." Like,
Yeah.
Parents really help them in high school to keep
Oh,
them
yes.
organized, and then they go out there and they're like,
yes,
fall
that's
on
why.
their face,
yeah, a lot of these skills need to be. I mean, a lot of these skills can be taught, right? I'm very big on coaching. I usually send the kids that are having a lot of a tough time in high school, and I usually, not in high school, in college, I'll say, why don't we look at a coach? Like let's speak to a coach. Sometimes
accountable,
keep
keep
them,
them on
yes,
task,
the
keep them-
accountability. Just because a lot of individuals with ADHD do have this like anxiety, and they're like, oh my gosh. But if they have that accountability person, they're more likely.
and it's motivating too.
It is
They
motivating.
get the feedback, they
Yes.
get all that, right?
Yes.
That's-
Yeah.
Coaches are great. And I usually send people over to coaches. If you're still questioning, like I would see a mental health professional, especially somebody who's experienced
Yeah.
with ADHD.
'Cause just because you're a mental health professional
does
Yeah.
not mean that
Yeah.
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
I mean,
Yes.
that's what I always drive
Yeah,
me
that's not
crazy.
your
Well, I'm
area.
seeing a therapist, but do they know
Yes.
Right.
ADHD? Do they
Right.
know neurodiversity? Do they
Right.
know whatever
Right.
their specialty is? Like I
Yeah.
have my specialties, you have yours, you have
Yeah.
yours. So that's a
Yes.
big piece. So that's a good question to always ask is, what's
Yes.
your background? What do you
Yes.
know about this? Not just,
Exactly.
because you're on my insurance,
Right.
That-
100%. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For sure. And then, if you still have questions, like a psychologist and getting an evaluation is a good way to find out, like,
Because that's a
do I
formal
have?
evaluation.
That is
They
a
sit
formal
down and they do
evaluation.
that.
And they sit you down. You have this, like, it's kind of like a questionnaire that you have to fill out. But not only are you filling it out, they're asking other people in your family to fill it
School
out
does
too.
it,
The
the
school
home
does
does
it
it,
at
right?
home. At home,
Yeah.
they do it. So I always say, like, I love psychologists for this reason, because they really go in depth when it comes to these
We
things.
just had Kathleen Hurley sit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's a good
Yeah.
person to know who does
Yes.
that. So, yeah, but that's a formal diagnosis. So it's not
Yeah.
just I see a symptom on TikTok, so I must
Right.
be.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just don't
more in
believe
depth.
everything you see on TikTok,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah. No, you have to get further information.
Right. And I think the other dangerous thing, is that a lot of these kids, teens, young adults, are saying like, oh, they're not only diagnosing, they're going to a psychiatrist and they're self-reporting. So, that's the only, and I don't know if most psychiatrists are going to take the time
get
and
the other
dig a
get the
little
other
bit more.
inputs. Yeah.
So if this kid is saying like, oh, well, I'm struggling with this and this and this and this, and that's the only report like
That they get.
that they get, then of course they're going to meet criteria for ADHD. But
And
if
I've
you
seen
have
that backfire both ways.
yep.
Right.
Where
Especially
they
if you're
don't get a diagnosis because everything seems fine
Yeah.
in their office, but they're not getting input from other places, and
Right.
and vice versa. So
Yeah, or can you, or being anxious and then getting ADHD medication, and now
yes,
you're
now
getting
you're on a
worse.
stimulant.
Yeah. Now you're on a stimulant and
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you.
welcome.
It's so nice
Can
talking
you
to
can you fill us a little bit in on where people can find you? We're gonna put you in the we
Comments
do this.
below.
This is
Yeah.
Oh
what
my
people do.
goodness.
We
Below.
put comments down there
Comments
and with
below.
links. That's
Okay.
right. That's what
Yes.
the kids do.
all right,
Like
yeah.
my age and
I love educating people about this stuff. So if anybody has any questions, you can reach me at the Social Mind Counseling on Instagram.
social mind counseling.
At the social,
Right
yes, at the Social
We'll
Mind
put the
Counseling.
links in there.
Yes.
Awesome.
I also have a website. You can visit me at, actually it's still on www.monicawellscounseling.com, but that will change at some point.
We will
But
put
we'll-
that in the link too.
Yes, we'll put
Yes,
that
and if
there.
it changes,
Yes.
we'll put that in
Yes.
the link too.
Yes.
Yes, but I love educating people, and if anybody has any questions, reach out for sure.
I know you've been so helpful with a lot of our clients. We've sent back and forth, so I really appreciate you doing this. And it's
Yeah,
fun.
thank you.
I love this stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
Jam.
So you'll come
Yeah.
back,
I'll come back.
even if Morgan's here?
Yes,
And we'll have
Okay.
coffee.
And we'll have
Lovely.
coffee. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
for sure.
That'll help our anxiety. Hit like and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications.
And for more information, check us out on goodingwellness.com, and please subscribe, like,
Hit the bell.
hit the bell.
The bell.
Hit the bell. Then you get notifications of every time we put up a new video.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not tech savvy, so yes.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Monica.